That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun rose sharp over Fort Harlan, casting long shadows across the parade ground where the 7th Security Detachment assembled at 0500 hours. Boots struck the dew-slick concrete in perfect unison, the rhythmic thud echoing off the low barracks buildings like a heartbeat under strain. Captain Harlan Graves, a broad-shouldered officer with 20 years in signals intelligence, stood at the front, his voice cutting through the chill air. "Platoon, attention!" The command snapped like a taut wire, and 200 personnel straightened, uniforms crisp under the floodlights that hummed faintly overhead. Medals glinted on chest pockets, and the faint scent of gun oil and fresh coffee lingered from the mess hall. Sergeant Elena Vasquez held her position in the third row, her posture unyielding despite the ache in her shoulders from yesterday's patrol drills. At 28, she was one of the unit's most seasoned K9 handlers. Her dark hair pulled into a regulation bun beneath her cap. Beside her, at heel, sat Loki, her 7-year-old Belgian Malinois. The dog's coat was a sleek black and tan, his ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring subtly at the morning breeze, carrying hints of diesel from the motor pool. Loki's tags jingled softly with each controlled breath, a reminder of the bond forged in the dust of training fields and the quiet nights of base security rotations. Elena's hand rested lightly on his harness, a gesture born of habit and trust. No words needed between them. The detachment was a tight-knit machine, forged in the rigid hierarchy of the Army's electronic warfare branch. Graves, with his clipped commands and unblinking gaze, enforced the chain of command like gospel. Below him, lieutenants like Reyes oversaw squads, while non-coms like Elena managed the details, perimeter sweeps, equipment checks, and the occasional sniff for contraband in the barracks. Loki wasn't just a tool. He was her partner, certified in explosives detection and now cross-trained for electronic anomalies after a classified upgrade program. Their routine was sacred. Dawn briefings, midday drills, evening logs, each step a thread in the web of operational security that protected the base's sensitive comms arrays from foreign threats. As the platoon executed a flawless about-face, Graves scanned the ranks, his eyes narrowing on the handlers section. "Sergeant Vasquez," he called out, his tone even but edged with authority. Heads turned subtly, the shuffle of feet the only disruption. Elena stepped forward, Loki matching her stride without a cue, his paws silent on the concrete. "Sir," she replied, saluting sharply. Graves nodded toward the barracks wing behind them, a squat line of cinder-block structures housing the signals techs. "New directive from brigade. Effective immediately. All non-essential animals are restricted from indoor spaces during duty hours. That includes K9 units, unless on active sweep. Your dog's been bunking in the handler's quarters. Clear him out by 0600. Secure him in the kennel annex." The order landed like a dropped magazine, heavy and unexpected. Elena's jaw tightened, but her face remained neutral, years of discipline holding her expression in check. Loki sensed the shift, his head tilting slightly toward her, a low whine suppressed in his throat. The kennel annex was a chain-link pen, a quarter-mile from the main buildings, exposed to the relentless desert wind that whipped sand across the base at all hours. Loki had earned his spot in the barracks after detecting a faulty transmitter during last month's audit, his nose picking up the ozone tang of overheating circuits that human techs had missed. Banning him now felt like a demotion, a fracture in the trust that defined their work. "Sir, with respect," Elena said, her voice steady, measured. Loki's integration protocol was approved by Major Ellis in Intel Ops. He's attuned to the barracks' baseline sense. Any deviation could compromise detection accuracy. Graves' eyes flicked to Loki, then back to her, unmoved. Protocols changed, Sergeant. We've got a high threat alert on signal interference. Brass wants 0 variables in the living quarters. That's the order. Dismissed. The platoon resumed its drill, the cadence resuming as if nothing had shifted, but Eleanor felt the ripple. Whispers would circulate later in the chow line, handlers grumbling about the brass tightening the leash. She led Loki back to formation, his gait steady beside her, but she could feel the warmth of his flank against her leg, a silent anchor. Obedience was the bedrock of their world. Questioning it invited the tribunal, the sidelining of a career built on precision and loyalty. By Aero 550, as the sky lightened to a pale grey, Elena approached the barracks door, Loki at her side. The air inside carried the familiar mix of polished boots, stale coffee, and the faint metallic hum of charging radios. Private Harlan Jenkins, a wiry signals tech with a fresh shave, lounged near the lockers, fiddling with his tablet. "Morning, Sarge," he said, glancing at Loki. "Heard the word. Tough break." Eleanor nodded curtly, unlocking the side door to the handler's alcove, a small partitioned space with Loki's bed, water bowl, and a rack of leashes. "Routine adjustment," she replied, keeping it professional. But as she knelt to gather his gear, Loki stiffened, his body going rigid. His nose lifted, sniffing the air in short, deliberate pulls. Then, without command, he moved, low and purposeful, toward the row of metal lockers along the far wall. "Vasquez!" Jenkins called, straightening. "Everything square?" Loki reached Locker 17, the one assigned to Specialist Tara Klein, a comms officer who'd been pulling late shifts on jammer countermeasures. The dog pawed at the base, a sharp alert bark escaping, 3 quick yips, the signal for electronic anomaly. Elena's pulse quickened. Loki didn't false positive. She straightened, hand on his collar. "Stand by, Private. He's got a hit." Jenkins frowned, stepping closer. "On what? Klein's locker? She's clean, full security vetting last week." Elena ignored the doubt, her training kicking in. She radioed the watch officer. "Handler Vasquez, K9 alert in Barracks B, Locker 17. Request immediate sweep team." Static crackled back, affirmative. But as the first techs arrived, Graves himself strode in, his face a mask of controlled irritation. "Sergeant, I gave a direct order. Dogs off limits indoors." Loki sat firm, eyes locked on the locker, unmoving. Elena met Graves's gaze, the weight of the chain pressing down. Obey and dismiss the alert. Risk missing whatever threat Loki had scented. Defy and face the consequences, her loyalty to the mission clashing with the command above. The air thickened with tension, the hum of the base's generators underscoring the standoff. In that moment, the routine fractured, and the test began. The sweep team arrived in under 2 minutes, their boots thudding against the linoleum floor of Barracks B like muffled drumbeats. Specialist Klein's locker stood at the center of the alcove, its grey metal door scarred from years of hasty slams, now the focal point under the harsh fluorescence that buzzed overhead. Elena kept her hand steady on Loki's collar. The dog's muscles taut beneath her fingers, his alert posture unwavering. The air in the room carried a faint, acrid tang. Ozone mixed with the sharper edge of overheated electronics, something Loki had isolated amid the everyday sense of sweat-soaked uniforms and cleaning solvent. Captain Graves positioned himself at the doorway, arms crossed over his chest plate. His radio clipped to his shoulder, crackling with updates from the command post. "Tech Sergeant Ruiz," he directed to the lead sweeper, a compact woman with a toolkit slung over her shoulder. "Process the alert per protocol, but make it quick. Duty hours don't pause for unverified hits." Ruiz nodded, kneeling beside the locker with a portable scanner in hand. She was one of the unit's electronic warfare specialists, her fingers deft as she attached sensor leads to the lock mechanism. Private Jenkins hovered nearby, his earlier casualness replaced by a furrowed brow, eyes darting between Loki and the door. "This is Klein's spot," he muttered to no one in particular. "She's been on the jammer sims all week. Nothing but standard gear in there." Elena didn't respond, her focus on Loki. The dog hadn't moved since his initial paw, his ears forward, nostrils flaring in rhythmic pulls. In training, they'd run scenarios like this 100 times, hidden transmitters, rogue frequencies masked as routine equipment. Loki's certification extended beyond bombs to the subtle electromagnetic signatures that could betray a base's secure lines. Signal jammers, in particular, emitted a unique heat residue and ionized air that his nose could pinpoint where human detectors lagged. But here, in the heart of their own barracks, the implications twisted like a faulty wire. The lock clicked open under Ruiz's code, the door swinging wide with a metallic creak. Inside, rows of neatly folded fatigues hung beside shelves of manuals and a half-empty water bottle. At the bottom, tucked behind a boot polish kit, sat a black canvas pouch, innocuous as a field ration pack. Ruiz lifted it carefully, her gloved hands unzipping the flap to reveal a compact device. Matte black casing, antenna folded flat, wires coiled like a serpent. The scanner beeped affirmatively. Active jammer, tuned to disrupt UHF bands, the kind that could scramble outbound reports without tripping base alarms. Graves stepped forward, his face hardening as he examined the find. "Secure it," he ordered Ruiz, who bagged the device in an evidence pouch, sealing it with tamper tape. The room's tension thickened, the faint hum of the barracks ventilation system underscoring the silence. Jenkins paled, backing against the wall. "That's not—" "Klein wouldn't. She's solid." "Stand down, Private," Graves snapped, his voice low but carrying the weight of command. He turned to Elena, his gaze appraising, the earlier irritation giving way to something sharper. Calculation. "Sergeant Vasquez, your dog's timing is." "Convenient, but you were under direct order to remove him from the premises. Explain why I shouldn't log this as insubordination." Elena's pulse steadied under the scrutiny, years of handler briefings stealing her response. She met his eyes levelly, Loki shifting slightly at her side, his warmth a grounding presence. "Sir, the alert occurred en route to compliance. Loki's protocol prioritizes immediate threats. Per FM 319, 40, K9 handlers retain operational discretion in detection scenarios. Dismissing him risked base security." The captain's jaw worked, but before he could reply, the radio on his shoulder erupted in clipped urgency. "Command to Graves. Confirm sweep in Barracks B. We've got anomalous interference on the east array. Reports dropping since 0400. Intel's lighting up." Graves keyed the mic, his tone clipped. "Affirmative. Device secured. Source, Locker 17, Klein's assignment. Vasquez's K9 flagged it." He paused, listening to the static-laced response, then signed off. The platoon outside had halted its drill, whispers filtering through the open door as handlers and techs craned for a view. Word spread like radio waves. K9 Defiance uncovers jammer in the ranks. By 0630, the incident had escalated to the unit's ops center, a windowless bunker adjacent to the parade ground where monitors flickered with signal tracings and satellite feeds. Elena stood at ease in the briefing room. Loki kennelled temporarily in the adjacent holding area, his whines faint through the reinforced door. Major Ellis, the intel chief with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual squint from poring over decrypts, presided over the initial debrief. Graves flanked him, while Klein, summoned from her shift, sat rigid in fatigues, her face ashen under the room's blue-tinted lights. "Specialist," Ellis began, sliding a tablet across the table with the jammer's schematics. "This device's footprint matches foreign optech. Chinese surplus, modified for low-signature bursts. It was active, masking pings to our perimeter sensors. Walk us through access." Klein's hands clasped in her lap, knuckles white. "Sir, I swear I've never seen it. My locker's been open during shifts. Anyone could have planted it." Her voice held steady, but her eyes flicked to Elena, a mix of gratitude and resentment. The room smelled of stale briefing coffee and circuit boards, the air conditioner whispering cool drafts across the table. Ellis nodded to Graves. "Captain, your order on K9 restrictions. Context?" Graves straightened. "Brigade alert on insider threats, sir. Streamlining variables in sensitive areas." Vasquez was notified at formation. The Major's gaze settled on Elena. "And yet here we are. Sergeant, your actions preserved operational integrity. But protocol demands review. You'll submit a full report by 1200. Klein, you're confined to quarters pending investigation. Security detail on all lockers. Full audit." As the meeting adjourned, Elena saluted and exited, the weight of the morning settling like dust on her shoulders. Outside, the parade ground baked under rising sun, soldiers resuming drills with renewed focus, the cadence sharper now. Loki waited in the holding pen, tail thumping as she approached, his dark eyes locking on hers with unspoken relief. She scratched behind his ears, the gesture brief but profound, a reaffirmation of their bond amid the shifting sands of command. Word of the find rippled through the detachment by midday chow, techs murmuring over trays of rehydrated stew about the dog that sniffed out sabotage. Jenkins cornered Elena near the serving line, his voice low. "You stuck your neck out, Sarge. Brass gonna let that slide?" She forked a bite, chewing methodically. "Chain of command sorts it, Private. Focus on your sweeps." But inwardly the dilemma gnawed. Obedience had nearly blinded them to the threat, Loki's instinct the only safeguard. Graves's order lingered like a shadow, a test of loyalty not just to dog and handler, but to the mission's fragile core. As afternoon patrols began, Eleanor led Loki along the perimeter fence, the desert wind tugging at their gear, carrying the distant thump of helicopter blades from the airfield. The base felt altered, eyes watching from every post, the invisible web of security now laced with doubt. One act of quiet defiance had exposed a fracture, and the reckoning was only beginning. The afternoon sun beat down on the perimeter fence like a relentless interrogator, turning the chain links into shimmering veils of heat haze. Elena Vasquez walked the eastern sector with Loki at heel, their shadows stretching long across the gravel path that bordered the razor wire. The dog's paws padded softly, kicking up faint puffs of dust that clung to his coat, while Elena's boots crunched in steady rhythm, the weight of her M4 slung across her chest a familiar anchor. Radio chatter from the watchtower crackled intermittently through her earpiece. Routine position checks, nothing out of the ordinary, but the base's pulse felt off-kilter, as if the Discovery in Locker 17 had tuned every frequency to suspicion. Back at the ops center, the investigation unfolded in measured layers, per standard procedure outlined in AR 385 for handling potential insider threats. Major Ellis had convened a preliminary board by 1400 hours, pulling in Graves, Ruiz from the sweep team, and Lieutenant Reyes, the platoon leader whose squad included Klein. The room's air was cool and sterile, recirculated through vents that hummed like distant engines, carrying the faint scent of dry erase markers from the tactical whiteboard. Schematics of the jammer lay pinned there, its compact design dissected. A low-power emitter capable of creating dead zones in comms traffic, subtle enough to evade routine sweeps, but devastating if scaled. Elena had been summoned mid-patrol, leaving Loki with a junior handler in the shade of the motor pool. She entered the ops center at ease, saluting crisply as Ellis gestured her to a chair. "Sergeant, walk us through the alert sequence again," the Major said, his voice even, pen poised over a notepad. No accusations yet, just the methodical grind of facts. Timestamps, Loki's behavioral cues, the exact moment the dog diverted from the alcove. "Sir, Zo 552 hours," Elena replied, her posture straight, eyes forward. "En route to kennel transfer per Captain Graves's order." Loki initiated independent scan. Short sniffs escalating to poor contact at Locker 17. Alert confirmed by Bark protocol. 3 yips for electronic anomaly. Graves sat across the table, his fingers drumming a silent tattoo on the armrest. The earlier calculation in his gaze now edged with restraint. "And your decision to proceed without clearing the handler space first?" he interjected. Tone clipped but professional. Elena met his look without flinching, the room's fluorescent hum underscoring the pause. "Discretion under FM 3-19, 40, sir. Immediate threat assessment supersedes relocation in active detection mode. Delaying could have allowed signal degradation, confirmed by the East Array interference logged at 0400. Reyes shifted in his seat, glancing at the jammer's bag on the evidence cart. "Klein's been solid on my watch. Late shifts on countermeasure drills, no access logs out of spec. But this device, it's not off-the-shelf army issue. Foreign mods suggest external planting." Ellis nodded, rubbing his chin. "CID's en route from Brigade, full forensics by 1800. Klein's interview starts now. We'll cross-reference her alibi. Sergeant Vasquez, your report's on my desk. Dismissed to resume patrol." Outside, the parade ground had cleared for the evening stand-down, soldiers dispersing to barracks with the low murmur of debriefs trailing them. Elena retrieved Loki from the motor pool, the dog's tail wagging in restrained arcs as he pressed against her leg, sensing the day's unresolved tension. They resumed the fence line, the desert wind picking up, whipping sand against their fatigues like fine grit in a gear. But as they rounded the eastern tower, Private Jenkins fell in step beside her, his signals pack bouncing lightly. "Sarge, word's out. Klein's denying everything. Says her locker's been jimmied, but no one's buying it yet." Eleanor kept her eyes on the horizon, where the faint outline of distant mountains blurred under the haze. "Speculation doesn't secure the perimeter, Private. Stick to your post." He hesitated, voice dropping. "But you..." Pushing back on the captain's order. "Handlers are buzzing. If CID clears you, this could rewrite the K9 protocols base-wide." The words hung, a ripple in the chain of command's still waters. Elena felt the moral weight settle deeper. Her defiance had preserved the mission, but at what cost to unit cohesion? Obeying Graves blindly might have let the jammer fester, eroding trust in the ranks. Yet challenging it openly invited scrutiny, not just on her, but on the handler's autonomy, the silent partnership with dogs like Loki that human oversight sometimes overlooked. By 1700, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting the base in elongated orange glows, the public reckoning ignited. A cluster of off-duty personnel gathered near the chow hall, their fatigues loosened, voices carrying on the cooling breeze. Specialist Tara Klein emerged from the ops center under escort, her face drawn, eyes scanning the crowd before dropping to the concrete. Whispers turned to murmurs. "Planted in her locker. That dog saved our asses." One handler, Corporal Diaz from the adjacent platoon, stepped forward, saluting Klein informally. "Hang in there, Spec. Whatever this is, it's not on you." But the tension fractured when Sergeant Harlan Mills, a veteran tech with a grudge against the K9 program, too many variables. He'd griped in briefings, pushed through. Bull. Vasquez ignored a direct order to play hero with her mutt. If protocols mean nothing, why bother with the chain? The group hushed, eyes turning as Elena approached with Loki, the dog sensing the shift and halting at her side, hackles subtle under his fur. Mills squared off, his stance aggressive, but within regs. "You think one sniff overrides command, Sergeant? This base runs on orders, not animal instincts." Elena's hand rested on Loki's head, the warmth of his coat steadying her. Witnesses encircled them. Jenkins, Diaz, a dozen others, the air thick with the scent of cooling metal from the nearby generators. "Instinct saved your comms array today, Sergeant Mills," she said, voice level, measured. Orders evolve when threats do. Question my actions to the board if you must. Graves appeared at the chow hall door, drawn by the commotion, his presence dispersing the crowd like a dispersal order. "Form up!" he barked, eyes locking on Elena. "Debrief in 5. This doesn't become a circus." As the group scattered, Klein paused near Elena, her voice a whisper. "Thank you. For Loki. If it's sabotage, someone wanted me to take the fall." She saluted weakly and moved on, escorted to quarters. Elena led Loki to the handler's annex, the night's chill settling in, stars pricking the darkening sky. The standoff had witnesses now, handlers, techs, even Graves himself, and the moral fault line widened, loyalty to command versus the quiet justice of a dog's unerring nose. Reports would flow upward by dawn, the institution's gears turning to assess not just the jammer, but the handler who bent the rules to expose it. In the quiet before lights out, Elena clipped Loki's leash, their bond a thread of certainty amid the unraveling order. "Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach." The fluorescent lights of the Opus Center briefing room cast stark shadows across the tactical maps pinned to the walls, their edges curling slightly from the dry air. By 2000 hours, the initial investigation had hardened into a formal inquiry, the kind that pulled strings all the way to brigade command. Major Ellis paced slowly before the whiteboard, marker in hand, as CID agent Harlan Thorpe, a lean civilian in a crisp suit that seemed out of place amid the fatigues, reviewed the jammer's internals under a portable lamp. The device lay dissected on the table, its circuit board exposed like a gutted engine, wires snaking toward a digital multimeter that beeped in low tones. The room smelled of heated solder and instant coffee, the ventilation system whispering steadily to combat the desert night's encroaching chill, seeping through the sealed doors. Eleanor stood at attention near the back, Loki secured in the adjacent kennel with a chew toy to occupy him. His occasional scratch against the chain link, a faint underscore to the proceedings. She'd submitted her report hours earlier, typed in precise paragraphs on the unit's secure terminal, timelines, Loki's behavioral indicators, the precise conflict with Graves's order. Now the board, Ellis, Graves, Reyes and Thorpe, turned their focus outward, piecing together the sabotage's footprint. Klein remained confined, her initial statement logged but unverified, while techs combed access logs from the barracks keycard system. "Timeline's tight," Thorpe said, his voice measured, Midwestern accent cutting through the hum. He tapped the multimeter's screen, where frequency spikes danced in red lines. "Jammer activated intermittently since Oru 200 yesterday. Short bursts to test our arrays without full blackout. Planted no earlier than 2200 the night before, based on residue buildup. Locker access." Klein's card pinged at 2130, but that's her routine shift end. No anomalies there. Graves leaned forward, elbows on the table, his fatigue sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms scarred from field ops. And Vasquez's role? She delayed compliance by 3 minutes, enough time for the alert, but it skirted protocol. Ellis shot him a glance, the major's squint deepening. Skirted. Captain, or executed? FM 319, 40 grants handler's latitude in imminent threats. The dog certification is brigade approved. Dismissing it mid-alert could have cost us the East Sector's integrity. Elena felt the exchange like a crosswind, steadying her stance as Reyes cleared his throat. "Sir, the platoon's morale is fracturing. Word spreading. Handlers see this as validation for K9 integration. But techs like Mills are pushing back. One dog's nose over chain of command. That's the line in the chow hall." The door buzzed open, admitting Private Jenkins with a stack of printouts, his face flushed from the jog across the compound. He saluted and placed the logs before Thorpe, who scanned them under the light. Perimeter cams show a shadow figure near Barracks B, At 21:45. Unidentified. No facial. Matches the planting window. The agent's pen scratched notes, the sound sharp in the quiet. Eleanor's mind raced through the implications. An insider, evading the base's layered security to sow disruption. Signal jammers like this weren't random. They preluded larger ops, masking infiltrations or exfil routes. Her defiance had caught it early, but the cost rippled. Klein's career in limbo, Graves's authority questioned, the unit's trust frayed like worn webbing. By 2200, the inquiry spilled into the open, the base's night routine disrupted by floodlights, illuminating the parade ground. A mandatory stand-down assembly formed under the stars, 200 personnel in formation, their breaths visible in the cooling air that carried the distant howl of coyotes from the perimeter. Graves took the podium, his silhouette stark against the lit backdrop of the ops center, microphone feedback whining briefly before settling. "Detachment," he began, voice amplified and steady. "Anomalous device recovered from Barracks B. Threat neutralized, but investigation ongoing. All personnel, heightened vigilance. Report deviations immediately, no exceptions." Murmurs stirred in the ranks, quelled by Lieutenant's sharp glances. Eleanor stood in the handlers section, Loki at her side on a short lead, his presence a quiet defiance of the earlier order. Ellis had waived it pending review. As Graves stepped down, Mills broke formation subtly, approaching from the tech's flank, his boots scuffing the gravel. A cluster formed around him, Jenkins, Diaz, a few signal specialists, their faces illuminated by phone screens checking off-duty alerts. "Vasquez," Mills said, loud enough for witnesses, his tone edged with the barracks undercurrent. "Your stunt today? Lucky sniff, maybe? But bending orders sets precedent. Next time some handler's dog chases a rabbit, and we lose the chain." Elena turned, Loki shifting to flank her, his low growl a vibration she quelled with a hand signal. The group tightened, eyes on the exchange. 20 souls now, the assembly's edge blurring into informal tribunal. "Precedent set by threats, Sergeant," she replied, voice level, projecting just enough. "Loki's trained for this. Your doubt nearly let it through." Jenkins stepped up, mediating. "Ease off, Mills. The jammer was live. Array logs don't lie. Vasquez followed instinct. We all train for that." But Mills pressed, gesturing toward the ops center lights. "Instinct over command? Graves gave the word for a reason. Insider risks. You think one alert clears you? CID's digging. If Klein's clean, who planted it? Someone covering tracks. And your dog's in the mix." The accusation hung, drawing Reyes from the podium, his approach halting the swell. "Form up," he ordered, voice cutting through. "Debriefs in squads. No debates." The group dispersed, but the seed was sown, whispers threading through the lines like static on a line. Klein, watching from her escorted position at the rear, met Elena's gaze across the ground, a nod of solidarity, fragile as desert glass. Back in the barracks by 2300, the air thick with the scent of oiled rifles and cooling concrete, Elena settled Loki in the alcove, his bed a simple mat under the bunk light. The dog's head rested on her boot as she reviewed her logbook, pen scratching entries. Alert confirmation, witness statements. The standoff's fallout. Graves paused at the door, his shadow long, knocking once before entering. "Sergeant," he said, closing the door softly, the latch clicking like a chambered round. "Board's recommending commendation for the find, but a formal review on the order violation. Ellis backs your discretion. I enforce the chain. This doesn't end clean." She looked up, saluting from her seat. "Understood, sir. Loki's bond isn't variable. It's the edge we need." He nodded, a rare softening in his stance, the weight of command evident in the lines around his eyes. "Maybe, but tomorrow, full audit, eyes on everyone." He exited, leaving the room to the quiet rhythm of Loki's breathing. Outside, the base settled into night watch, patrols doubling along the fence, radios humming with position calls. The reckoning had gone public, fractures visible under the institutional glare, loyalty tested not just in shadows, but in the light of assembly and audit. Elena stroked Loki's ears, the gesture a silent vow, conscience over compliance when the mission demanded it. Dawn would bring more scrutiny, the system's gears grinding toward justice or reprisal, but in that moment their partnership held firm against the tide. The first light of dawn filtered through the narrow slits of the barracks windows, painting faint stripes across the concrete floor where Elena Vasquez knelt beside Loki's mat. The dog stirred at her touch, his eyes opening to meet hers with that unwavering focus, his tail thumping once against the worn canvas. The air carried the crisp bite of morning dew, mixed with the lingering metallic tang from the ops center's electronics, a reminder that the night's quiet had done little to resolve the fractures exposed by the jammer's discovery. Elena clipped his leash, her fingers steady despite the summons vibrating on her secure phone. Report to the command post at 0600 for the full audit briefing. Sleep had been fleeting, her mind replaying the assembly's murmurs, Mills's challenge echoing like unresolved static. Outside, the parade ground stirred with the early cadence of reveille, boots striking gravel in disciplined rows as the detachment formed up under a sky streaked with pale pink. Captain Graves stood at the podium again, his voice carrying over the ranks like a well-tuned transmission. Full audit commences today. All lockers, gear and access logs under review. No exceptions. Insider threats demand precision. His gaze swept the formation, lingering briefly on the handlers section where Elena stood, with Loki at heel, the dog's ears pricked to the commands. Whispers had hardened into sidelong glances. The techs eyed the K9 units with a mix of resentment and reluctant awe, the chain of commands in visible threads pulling tighter. By 0630, the audit teams fanned out across the base, gloved hands methodically sifting through footlockers and duffels in the open air of the quad. Elena joined the sweep in Barracks B, Loki leading on a loose lead, his nose working the rows with methodical sniffs, short, deliberate pulls that missed nothing. The scent profile had shifted overnight. The ozone residue from the jammer lingered faintly, but now overlaid with the sharper notes of anxiety sweat from the personnel milling under supervision. Specialist Klein remained confined, her quarters sealed with yellow tape that fluttered in the breeze, but her squadmates moved with forced efficiency, unpacking shelves under the watchful eyes of CID Agent Thorpe and his assistant. Thorpe approached Elena mid-sweep, his suit jacket unbuttoned against the warming air, notepad in hand. "Sergeant, your dog's performance yesterday? Impressive. We've got prelim forensics. The jammer's mods traced to a black market supplier, Eastern European routing through unmonitored ports. Not Klein's work. Her financials are clean, no red flags." He glanced at Loki, who paused at a nearby locker, sniffing but not alerting. "But the planting window implicates someone with barracks access. Your alert bought us time. Arrays are stable now, no further interference." Elena nodded, her posture unchanging as she noted Loki's all clear in her log. "Appreciate the update, Agent. Loki's tuned for these signatures. Human oversight fills the gaps." The words carried the weight of their partnership, a quiet affirmation amid the procedural grind. Yet beneath it, the moral tension coiled. Her defiance had unmasked the threat, but it had also cast doubt on Graves's directive, forcing the unit to confront how rigid orders could blind them to instinct's edge. The audit dragged into midday, the sun climbing to hammer the quad with unrelenting heat that baked the scent of disturbed gear into the air. Leather polish, gun oil, and the faint mustiness of folded linens. In the ops center, the board reconvened, monitors displaying access logs in scrolling green text, satellite feeds overlaying perimeter anomalies. Major Ellis presided, his squint sharper under the fluorescence, while Graves reviewed incident reports beside him. Elena entered at Reyes's queue, saluting before taking a seat. Loki kennelled outside with a handler trainee, his whines muffled through the door. "Sergeant," Ellis began, sliding a tablet her way with video stills from the perimeter cams. Grainy footage of a hooded figure near the barracks shadow at 21:45. CID's enhanced this. Matches no one in our roster, but the gate suggests military training. Your input on Loki's potential to track residual sense. She studied the images, the figure's posture evoking a ghost in the machine. "Sir, if we isolate the jammer's handler residue, sweat, oils, Loki could baseline it against the site. Cross-training allows for human trace following, short range." The proposal hung, a bridge between K9 capability and institutional protocol, but Graves interjected, his tone measured. "Risky, Major. Extending handler discretion beyond detection invites variables. The order to restrict animals was to minimize exactly that, uncontrolled elements in secure zones." Ellis leaned back, the chair creaking softly. "And yet, Sergeant Vasquez's variable neutralized the device. Thorpe's report recommends protocol review, integrate K9 alerts into chain of command overrides for imminent threats." The room stilled, the hum of cooling fans underscoring the shift. Elena felt the ripple. Her actions not just defended, but leveraged into potential reform, the cost of integrity etching lines in the system's rigid frame. The public dimension escalated by 1400, as the audit uncovered a second anomaly. Tampered keycard logs in the signal's tech bay, pointing to unauthorized access during Klein's shift overlap. Word leaked through the chow line, drawing a crowd near the motor pool where off-duty personnel clustered under the shade of Humvees. Mills led the charge again, his voice rising over the idling engine's rumble. "See? One dog gets a pass, and now we're chasing ghosts. Vasquez's push opened the floodgates, audit on everyone because protocols bent." Jenkins countered from the edge, arms crossed. "Or saved us from a bigger hit. Jammers don't plant themselves, Mills. If Loki hadn't flagged it, we'd be blind to the insider." Elena approached with Loki, the dog sensing the tension and positioning himself between her and the group. His stance alert but controlled. A dozen witnesses now, handlers, techs, even a few lieutenants pausing their patrols, the air thick with the scent of hot asphalt and exhaust. "This isn't about bending," she said, voice steady, eyes meeting Mills's. "It's about adapting. The threat evolved, so must we. Loki's alert was protocol, discretion in the field." Mills stepped closer, his breath quick. "Field's outside, Sergeant. Indoors, it's orders. Your loyalty to that dog over command, it erodes us all." The exchange drew Reyes, who dispersed the group with a sharp order, but not before Thorpe noted the witnesses, his pen scratching in a field notebook. "Public dissent logged," he murmured to Eleanor as the crowd thinned. "Could sway the board, shows unit stress from the incident." By evening, stand down, the reckoning crested in the formal tribunal set up in the Ops Center Annex, a partitioned space with folding chairs and a projector humming to life. Ellis chaired, Graves and Thorpe flanking as Klein took the stand first, her uniform pressed, voice clear under the lights. "I had no knowledge, sirs. My shifts align with the logs. Someone used my access shadow." Relief etched her features when the board cleared her preliminarily, reassigning her to light duty pending full vetting. Elena's turn followed, the room's air conditioner cycling cool gusts across her neck. "Sergeant Vasquez," Ellis said, "your report stands. The violation of relocation order is noted, but mitigated by outcome. Recommendation: formal reprimand waived, with commendation for detection. K9 protocols to be revised base-wide. Handlers granted 5-minute alert windows in restricted zones." Graves' expression tightened, but he nodded. "Understood, sir. Chain remains intact." As the session adjourned, Eleanor exited to the cooling night, Loki greeting her with a pressed flank, his warmth cutting the chill. The base's lights dotted the darkness, patrols' flashlights sweeping like search beams. Mills passed at a distance, his salute crisp but eyes averted, the first crack in resistance. Her defiance had sparked not reprisal, but quiet reform. Memos circulating by morning, integrating K9 discretion into standing orders. Yet the cost lingered. Trust rebuilt one patrol at a time, loyalty's legacy forged in the tension between duty and conscience. In the handler's alcove, Eleanor unclipped Loki's lead, the dog's head resting on her knee as she logged the day's close. The wind whispered through the vents, carrying the faint hum of secured arrays, a testament to the bond that had held against the storm. Tomorrow's drills would test the new balance, the institution learning from one handler's stand, but the shadows of sabotage still loomed, demanding vigilance beyond the chain. The morning briefing in the ops center carried a new undercurrent of resolve. The air thick with the scent of fresh printed memos and the low buzz of printers spitting out revised protocols. Major Ellis stood at the head of the conference table, his salt and pepper hair catching the overhead lights as he distributed copies of the updated FM 319, 40 addendum, K9 handler discretion now codified for indoor alerts, a direct ripple from Eleanor's stand. The room held a mix of handlers and techs, their fatigues starched and patches aligned, but the glances exchanged spoke volumes. Trust mending, yet fragile, like a signal patched but prone to interference. Elena sat midway down the table, Loki at her feet under the chair, his harness clipped to her boot for stability. The dog's flank rose and fell in even rhythm, his presence a quiet emblem of the change. Captain Graves reviewed the document beside Ellis, his voice steady as he outlined implementation. Effective 0700, all sweeps include dual human K9 teams in restricted zones. Report anomalies immediately, no delays. His eyes met Elena's briefly, a nod acknowledging the shift, though the lines around his mouth betrayed the institutional cost of bending the chain. Outside, the parade ground thrummed with the detachment's morning drill, boots pounding gravel in synchronized cadence, the distant whine of a Black Hawk warming up on the pad, adding to the disciplined hum. Private Jenkins leaned against the ops doorframe during the break, his signals pack slung over one shoulder. "Sarge, you see the board's memo? Your name's in the footer, Vasquez precedent. Techs are grumbling, but handlers owe you." She folded her copy neatly, tucking it into her cargo pocket. "Not about credit, Private. It's about the mission. Loki's nose doesn't care for memos." The dog lifted his head at his name, ears perking, a subtle wag of his tail brushing her leg, a bond forged in silence, now etched into policy. The audit's momentum carried into the afternoon, CID agent Thorpe coordinating a perimeter trace with Loki's assistance. They moved along the eastern fence, the chain links rattling faintly in the rising wind that whipped sand across the gravel path. Loki led on a tracking harness, his nose low to the ground, following the faint human trace residue Thorpe had isolated from the jammer's casing, sweat proteins and synthetic oils unique to the planter. Elena kept pace, her hand light on the lead, reading his cues. A pause for direction change, a quick sit for confirmation. The desert heat pressed down, turning their uniforms damp, the air laced with creosote from the sparse brush beyond the wire. Thorpe walked parallel, his tablet scanning for electronic echoes, the screen's glow reflecting in his sunglasses. Residual sense fading, winds scattering it. "But if your dog picks up the trail to a vehicle drop, we close this." His tone held professional respect, a far cry from the initial skepticism. Eleanor nodded, her focus on Loki as he veered toward a service gate, pouring at disturbed earth where tire tracks scarred the dust. The alert bark came sharp, 3 yips echoing off the fence posts, drawing the escort team's radios to life. "Positive trace!" Eleanor reported into her mic, kneeling to bag a soil sample laced with the same oily residue. Graves arrived minutes later, Humvee tires crunching to a halt, his face set in the mask of command. "Confirm?" he asked, examining the site, the wind tugging at his cap. "Affirmative, sir. Loki's locked on the handler's path. Leads to the motor pool auxiliary lot. Possible external link." The captain's gaze shifted to the dog, appraising, then back to her. The moral fault line had eased, but the weight of reform pressed. His order, once ironclad, now amended, forcing a re-evaluation of variables he'd sought to eliminate. By 1600, the trace converged in the ops center, where forensics linked the residue to a discarded glove found in a dumpster, fibers matching foreign-issue fatigues, smuggled via supply convoy. Klein, cleared fully, joined the debrief, her posture straighter, eyes clear as she reviewed the evidence chain. "It was aimed at me," she said quietly, voice steady under the fluorescence. "Shift overlap made me the patsy. Disrupt comms, blame the tech." Gratitude flickered in her glance toward Elena. A salute held a beat longer than regulation. The public layer thickened as the findings circulated through squad briefings, the chow hall buzzing with restrained discussion over trays of MRE reheats. Sergeant Mills sat at the tech's table, his fork paused mid-air as Jenkins relayed the trace results. "Dog work again? Fine, it caught the jammer. But this precedent, handlers calling shots indoors, erodes the structure we bleed for." Diaz, from the handler's side, leaned in, voice low. "Structure that almost let sabotage slip? Vasquez's call saved the arrays. Your arrays, Mills. Loyalty's not just to brass, it's to the unit." The table hushed, a dozen ears tuned, the scent of steamed vegetables mingling with the undercurrent of debate. Elena entered then, Loki at heel, drawing eyes like a magnet. She took a seat across, her presence diffusing the tension without a word, discipline speaking louder than argument. Mills met her gaze, his challenge softening to resignation. "Maybe, but if this opens doors to more discretion, who's accountable when it backfires?" Elena's response was measured, her hand resting on Loki's head in a subtle stroke. "Accountability's shared, Sergeant. The chain holds when we all adapt. Orders evolve, or threats do." Reyes oversaw the exchange from the line, nodding approval as he passed. The moment rippled outward, handlers standing taller, techs murmuring concessions, the institution's gears turning toward integration, Elena's integrity, the catalyst. Yet the saboteur remained at large, the trace pointing to an external cell probing the base's flanks, demanding sustained vigilance. As evening fell, the detachment assembled for a voluntary integrity seminar in the auditorium, floodlights casting long shadows across the rows of folding chairs. Ellis opened, projector humming with slides on threat evolution, emphasizing K9 roles in the revised doctrine. Elena spoke briefly when called, her words concise. "Loki's bond isn't defiance, it's precision. When conscience aligns with duty, we secure more than signals." Applause followed, sparse but genuine. Mills among those clapping, his nod a quiet concession. Graves pulled her aside post-session, the auditorium emptying to the shuffle of boots and low chatter. "Your actions sparked this, Sergeant. Board recommends unit-wide training, K9 crossovers for techs, chains stronger for it." The admission carried weight, his handshake firm, the first bridge across the divide. In the handler's alcove that night, Elena brushed Loki's coat under the bunk light, the dog's contented sigh filling the quiet space, scented with wet fur from a quick rinse. The wind howled outside, but inside, legacy took root. Reform not in fanfare, but in memos and nods, her stand transforming doubt into doctrine. The cost of integrity had been scrutiny and strain, but the reward was a unit annealed, loyalty's quiet fire burning brighter against the shadows still lurking beyond the wire. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The days following the Integrity Seminar blurred into a rhythm of heightened drills and cross-training sessions, the base's air humming with the sharp crack of commands and the whine of detection gear under test. Elena Vasquez moved through it all with measured steps, Loki at her heel, his paws silent on the gravel paths that wound between the barracks and the ops center. The desert sun climbed higher each morning, baking the earth until the scent of heated sand rose like a veil, mingling with the oiled tang of freshly calibrated scanners distributed to every squad. The revised protocols had taken root overnight. Memos pinned to bulletin boards, briefings laced with references to the Vasquez precedent, and the detachment adapted grudgingly at first, then with the quiet efficiency of soldiers who knew survival hinged on evolution. In the Handler's Annex, now expanded with partitioned bays for integrated tech teams, Elena oversaw the first crossover exercise at 0800. Corporal Diaz and Private Jenkins paired with junior handlers, their tablets synced to Loki's alert logs as the dog demonstrated a baseline sweep. The room's air conditioner cycled steadily, cooling the space against the midday build-up, while Loki's nose worked the mock lockers lined with concealed emitters, faint heat signatures mimicking jammers, their ozone whiff subtle under the fluorescent glare. "Watch the cues," Elena instructed, her voice even, hand signaling Loki to sit on a positive hit. Ear flick, nostril flare, then the paw. It's not instinct alone, it's trained precision. Jenkins knelt beside the dog, gloved hand hovering near the alert point, his earlier skepticism replaced by focused notation. "Got it, Sarge. Linking this to our array monitors. Real-time flag if scents correlate with signal drops." Diaz nodded from across the bay, her own K9, a sleek German shepherd named Jax, mirroring the drill. The session stretched into hours, sweat beading on brows, but the bond formed. Techs learning to read K9 signals, handlers grasping electronic footprints. Graves observed from the doorway, arms crossed, his presence a silent endorsement of the reform he'd once resisted. When the exercise wrapped, he approached Elena, his boots echoing softly on the linoleum. "Results by 1400, Sergeant. Brigades auditing the integration. Your input shapes it." She saluted, Loki shifting to her side, his warmth a steady pulse. "Yes, sir. The chain's only as strong as its links. K9s fill the gaps we can't see." The captain's nod was brief, but it carried the weight of concession, the institutional gears grinding smoother now that doubt had been forged into doctrine. By afternoon, the reform's ripples reached the perimeter patrols, where mixed teams, handlers, techs, and medics traced potential infiltration routes under Thorpe's guidance. The CID agent had extended his stay, his suit traded for tactical vest, coordinating with Ellis to map the saboteurs' external ties. Elena led one such patrol along the western fence, Loki on tracking harness, the wind tugging at their gear and carrying the dry rasp of sagebrush from beyond the wire. Jenkins flanked her, scanner in hand, while Klein, reinstated to full duty, her clearance stamped, monitored comms from the trailer's shade. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that danced across the chain links, the air cooling to reveal the faint, lingering trace Loki had followed days prior. "Residual hit," Elena reported as Loki paused at a weathered post, his bark sharp and confirmatory. She bagged the soil sample, the earth still holding microscopic fibers from the glove, now linked to a rogue contractor in the supply chain, a low-level operative feeding intel to foreign probes. Thorpe keyed his radio from the trailer's step, voice clipped. "Affirmative. Matches the dumpster find. External cell confirmed. No insiders. It was a plant to test our defenses." Relief threaded the transmission, the base's arrays pinging clean on the monitors, their hum a backdrop to the patrol's debrief. Klein approached as they returned, her stride steady, the yellow tape long removed from her quarters. "Sergeant, that day in the barracks, Loki's alert didn't just save the mission, it saved me. She extended a hand, the gesture formal yet warm, her eyes reflecting the gratitude of one who'd stared down false accusation. Elena clasped it briefly, protocol holding emotion in check. Team effort specialist, your logs helped close the loop. But in the quiet exchange, mentorship took shape, Klein volunteering for K9 auxiliary training, her tech skills bridging the divide, a legacy of trust rebuilt from the fracture. The evening assembly in the auditorium marked the audit's close, floodlights bathing the stage, where Ellis presented the findings to the full detachment. 200 personnel filled the rows, their uniforms aligned under the banners of unit crests, the air scented with polished leather and anticipation. Loki sat at Elena's feet in the front rank, his ears forward as the Major's voice filled the space. The jammer incident exposed vulnerabilities, not in personnel, but in rigidity. Sergeant Vasquez's actions, guided by her K9 partner, neutralized the threat and prompted essential reform. Effective immediately, K9 integration expands base-wide, joint protocols, shared oversight, and annual cross-training. This unit emerges stronger, loyalty not to orders alone, but to the mission's integrity. Applause rose, measured and disciplined. Mills among the clappers, his earlier barbs silenced by the evidence. Graves followed with commendations. Elena awarded the Army Achievement Medal for exceptional service, pinned to her chest with a salute held just a beat long, Loki's tail thumping softly against the floor. Klein received exoneration papers, her squad cheering as she stood. The moment transformed Elena, not into a hero of fanfare, but a symbol etched in policy, her conscience the catalyst for a system that now balanced chain with instinct. As the assembly dispersed into the night, stars wheeling overhead against the black desert sky, Elena walked Loki back to the annex, the gravel crunching under their steps. The base's generators hummed faintly, a steady pulse underscoring the quiet victory. In the alcove's soft light, she unharnessed him, his head nuzzling her hand in unspoken partnership. The wind sighed through the vents, carrying the promise of dawn patrols. But here, in the stillness, legacy settled. One handler's stand had woven loyalty's thread deeper into the ranks, proving that moral courage, tempered by discipline, could safeguard not just signals, but souls. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of They Ordered Her Dog Out of the Barracks, then the K9 alerted to a signal jammer hidden in a locker. See you in the next one.